Tell you?
Hello, welcome to Somacare Wellness Center's Yin class. Yin is probably what is so necessary in our lives when we feel a little busy and a little overworked, overstressed, to actually do the opposite of the running around and looking around and paying attention to out there. We're going to take some time and pay attention in here, where it's needed the most, so we can then focus on out there in a more optimal way. So this is going to be a 30-minute Yin class, and what you'll need for today's class is 2 blocks, which can look like 2 encyclopedias or 2 books stacked on top of each other. So I guess 4 books, right? Getting resourceful here. Or having a bolster or a pillow, a towel that's folded onto itself so it gives you some depth, and a blanket, which I know we all probably have a blanket or 2 at home that will be helpful too. All right, let's get started. The first pose is child pose. So child pose, I'll be demonstrating the poses, but then I might come out of the pose, but I'll initially show the demonstration, so if you have any questions of what we're doing, you can look up here. But Yin is all about stopping looking around, so I will demonstrate the pose at first, which is literally just getting onto your hands and knees. And if being on your knees feels a little tough for some fragile knees, then put a blanket underneath your knees. Or you can, if you have a mat underneath you, roll up your mat and put a little cushion underneath your knees. Keep your big toes touching behind you, and then start to send your hips back towards those heels. Send your chest forward and down towards the ground, and then maybe even dropping your forehead towards the ground. Now some may have tighter back neck muscles that preclude you from bringing your forehead right to the ground. Maybe you cross your forearms underneath your forehead so that you can rest that crease of tension onto your forearms. And if setting your hips back towards your heels feels too intense right now, and right now is probably the most important moment you're experiencing, since it's the only moment you're experiencing. Listen to your partner. Right now that's probably across the knees. Some people feel that stretch. Just plug a block right between your ankle bones so that your bum can rest right on your heels. If the arms aren't crossed in front of you, some might find that a block underneath your forehead and you can place your arms next to your leg bones. Full expression of Balasana. Also, you can reach the arms forward. Some of you might find that is too much to stretch the arms way up towards the tippy top of your mat. Then, be strong enough to bend your elbows a little bit. That's a tight area in 99% of the people out there. The front of the chest, shoulders. So, take some time to listen to your body and respond from the feedback you're getting. So we're going to be in this pose for at least a minute, which is not a long time. We're going to go through these poses a little quicker. We're going to have a little less of the Yin poses, but in the Yin pose you need to be in the pose for at least a minute and 20 seconds. That's so your fascial tissue, your tight, tense posturing tissue can slowly unravel. Who doesn't need that? A little bit of unraveling. with that being said, to help with not just the physical unraveling, but to get on the floor and just be in child pose, coming back to not knowing. You know what I mean? Like not knowing when we were all kids and we didn't know if we were who we were just in the moment. And Balasana or child pose can be a great way to practice starting anew. To help with that, use your breath right now. Take some very deep breaths. And I didn't really give you any modifications for the knees, but sometimes the knees are spread wide or pressed together. When they're pressed together, it's a little more of a forward bend as your torso drapes over your knees. If you spread the knees wide, it can maybe afford a little back bend in the lower back. Choose something, and then breathe deeply for 30 more seconds. Come back to your center. Come back to that place in you that is still, that is calm, quiet, and connect there. We're going to slowly come out of this pose now. That doesn't mean you have to move. Slow just means slow. And the cue was said, but you're starting to listen to your deep breathing as maybe an anchor for you to navigate to the next pose. The next pose is on your hands and knees. So if your arms were next to your legs, slowly plant them down on the ground and lift up your torso away from the ground, back up on your hands and knees. Maybe a few cat-cow poses. If that happens organically, you just start to move that spine. But be gentle. Consistently, constantly, patiently breathing. And then back to a neutral spine. Look down at your hands. And then point your fingers towards your knees. Towards your knees means towards your knees. Maybe as you start to do it, you feel it's not right. You know, and you'll know when it's not right. You'll feel something like burn in the joint or something too tight in the joint. Then it might just be you skip one side. This is for all the the flexors of the wrist. And our wrists are very tight from a lot of phone, computer work. You ever heard of carpal tunnel? This is a famous place and a pretty famous syndrome. And syndromes are just as they sound, kind of happening in all different kind of places. Maybe it's your neck that's tight, so maybe you let your head go. Maybe the shoulders are tight, you kind of just drop into the shoulders instead of holding them rigid. Keeping the elbows relatively straight. This is a practice of letting go. Letting go of some of the tightnesses and tensions physically. In this extremity that we own, our wrists, but also letting go of that tightness in our chest, tightness around our brain, around our eyes and jaw. Just noticing where it builds up and choosing, making the choice to let it go. Breathe. This is usually the point at home where, you know, the kitty cats will come, or the dog will come, or your kids will come over and say, "What are you doing?" See if you can use those distractions as a challenge to your focus on what you're doing. It's not easy. Just breathe. They may even start to practice with you because they haven't seen you this calm today. Slowly, we're going to come out of this pose. And we're not in it long, just enough. 120 seconds. Come back up with the fingers pointing forward and then up onto your hands and knees. Just so you can release the wrists and start some circles at the wrist, one direction then the other, maybe opening and closing your fingers. Nice. All right, grab your bolster, make sure it's next to you, and your two blocks, make sure they're next to you. And then step your right foot forward between your hands. So it looks like you're trying to lunge forward. Tuck your back toes, that's your left foot, tuck the toes underneath and lift up your left knee and take the bolster and place it right underneath your left thigh bone, right at the distal part. Not the part close to your hip, but the part closer to your knee. And then drop that thigh bone right onto the bolster. If the bolster seems like it's too far down, there you go. You learn to modify. How about in yin class, we learn to modify, to be resourceful with the small amount of things that we have. Right? Economize. Release the left toes. That's kind of committing to the pose. But if you feel like something's tense in your leg and something you might want to come out of the pose, you can keep the toes tucked. It's a nice stretch for the fascia of your left foot. You can release and bring the tips of the toenails onto the ground, and you're actually stretching the shin split muscle, the front of your left shin. All right, so this is dragon pose, and you might note that the arms can just drop if you're resting your right chest on your right thigh. But if your arms aren't that long, maybe you place blocks underneath your hands, or you can use the blocks to rest your elbows. Blocks on the inside, if you like to drop down your chest to the inside of that right knee bone. And we got 30 more seconds here. So already, probably everyone's starting to feel the need to fidget, the need to make this feel as good as possible. Well, good luck. It's not going to feel good, it's going to feel right. If you've been sitting for a while, the whole front of your left hip, the hip flexor area, gets a sweet little touch to open up some of that tension and tightness. And all you have to do for the last 15 seconds is breathe deeply. Beautiful. Slowly prop yourself back up. Tuck your left toes. Move that bolster out of the way so you can slide that right foot back. And then any movements, right knee goes back. So I'm on my hands and knees again. And then maybe back to child pose, forward to a slight little up dog or cobra pose. Maybe dynamically moving between those two, all the while breathing deeply. Not in any rush to get to the next side, right? Even though there shouldn't be any apprehension at all. Right? You're only going to choose from the feedback you're getting from this part of your body, which immediately when you step that left foot deeply between your hands forward, you start to feel already the stretch in the front of that right hip. And if you want, you can send that right knee back a little bit more. The bolster underneath, tuck the right toes. Find yourself in the pose that's appropriate for the feedback you're receiving. And then stay and breathe. A minute and 20. Breathe. Deep, deep breathing. Noticing your attention to the inhales. That's the only activity you're doing, is inhaling. And just letting the exhales leave your body. Letting go. Letting go your need to be comfortable. Noticing you're at your edge of comfort, but you're managing it with your deep breathing. Think of that skill set being used elsewhere in your day-to-day. Deep breathing. Come back to your center. We're going to slowly morph out of this pose, just as slowly as we got into it. So that means tucking the right toes, lifting the right knee, moving that bolster off to the side, replacing the right knee back to both hands and knees on the ground, and then moving according to your guru. Always ask, how far? What should I do? And usually, if you're erring on the side of being gentle with any of that, that the response coming from you is going to be the right thing. All right, lay on your back. Grab your block. Actually, grab both blocks. Place your feet flat on the ground so your knees are bent, feet are flat. Shoulders relaxed, breath is deep. Start to press your hips off the ground, just so you have enough space to place your block underneath your hips. And then put your hips back on the ground, which now is the block. All these props we use are just to bring the ground more up to us, so we can melt on the ground. As are a lot of props in our life. They just help us learn and evolve and let go. If you want to take that second block, if it makes sense, this is the front of the hips, and the block is right on the lower back, not where the kidneys are, and not in the fleshy bum, but it's right on the lower back. And you'll feel it's like the sacral bone. It's a very distal end of your spine. Just going to hang out here for another 5 seconds. Breathe. Slowly press your hips away from that block, or both blocks. Release your body back to the ground. And the last pose for yin, the last pose for life. This was a short one, from child to corpse pose. Take the time you need to breathe in corpse pose. Feel your head drop back against the ground. Feel your spine and shoulders melt down. Feel your skin and bones and tendons and fascia respond to your choice of being calm and accepting of the moment that's in front of you. Now, if you have more time, please take more time. The luxury of being at home is sometimes you can stay a little longer in this incredibly important, not easy. Most important things are not easy. Stay and let go. I want to thank you for your time here. Have a blessed day. Namaste.